Hi there. This is H. Victoria Hargro Atkerson. I'm an author and a writer. And I'm sitting here looking at my dog, looking at me like she's listening. Okay. I'm an author and a writer, and I do historical romance because I love history and I love romance. So I do historical romance most of the time, and sometimes I just do romance. So we do what we love to do, and I want you to do the same thing. If you like to write, that's what I want you to do. Now, I want to review some of my books. The first one were two. These two are Stones Along the Path, Part 1 and Part 2. And we have Part 3 coming out this year. Yay! This is a great story because it's a love story, mostly about two people who are from two different worlds, and they meet, they fall in love instantly, and they're very passionate about each other, but they have problems because they're from totally different cultural backgrounds, and those backgrounds become a problem because their standards are different. What one expects in one country is not necessarily what one understands or accepts. So the cultural differences in this book would be the third character and a major character in this book. There are a lot of issues in this book pertaining to family and how these two people affect an entire family and generations of families. Things that we do in our normal lives, because whether you know it or not, what you do has an effect on your family, your siblings, your children, your parents, and it's really interesting when things like divorce happen in one family. uh, those are things that affect the entire family because sometimes the relationships break up and sometimes they don't. I know in our family we always say, if you get in, you can't get out. So if you marry into the family, you're still a part of the family. And even if you divorce, you still accept it. You're still a part of us. And even though we may have difficulties, we still have that attachment to that person. So, which is demonstrated in this book too. It is a wonderful thing. I think the family structure is something we need to look at in this country because what we are redoing and reassigning roles and genders, but the family structure is something we need to preserve, whether it's headed by males, females, two males, or two females. It doesn't matter. That family unit is so absolutely important because they're the ones responsible for bringing that next generation into to reality and into our next generation, which is coming up. So it's very important to create that family structure so that those people growing in that system can be productive and loving people. So, as I said, Stones Along the Path is a multi generational book, and it talks about these two people as the central characters and how they absolutely conflict with each other because the book starts out with a breakup. They're madly in love, but they break up. And we follow their lives through 1, 2, and 3 coming up. So take a look at that. It's a great, great story. Now, we have this one, which is Walking Among the Kudzu. This is a story that we don't mention. I don't think we may mention it in the story about the kudzu vines, and I think I did a video on it. If you want to go back and look at some of the crazy ways that kudzu vines grow in the South, and of course, this is indicative of the Georgia landscape. But in this instance, we use the kudzu vine as a symbol of trouble because anyone who goes and cuts through vines, believe me, they are in trouble. And it's not an easy thing to do. Anything could grow under there. I mean, it is absolutely crazy because kudzu vines take over an area once it gets in it. You know, and we talked about kudzu. I have a couple of videos. I won't go into it. Just go back and read it, what kudzu vines do. But this particular story talks about adolescence, which is a very difficult time in our lives. And that's everyone. And I think a lot of times we forget when we get older how adolescents have affected us and what impression it leaves on our lives, the difficulties that we have, whether they're with family members or with issues in school, whatever, but it affects everything we do and who we are, we are to become. And one of the things that I do now, I am working with a group of delinquent children who are incarcerated. We are incarcerating too many children in America. This is absolutely ridiculous. So it's important that we get this population of children get and make arrangements to get them out of the situation that they're in, because it does not make sense for America to be closing down schools, especially in black areas, and building prisons. And our children are adjudicated delinquent at a drop of a hat. So it's really important that we get involved. So this book talks about uh, family rejection because of adolescent behaviors. And we can't criminalize things that adolescents do when it's something that's normal for their maturation and the difficulties that they have. They normally test the boundaries that are placed on them, whether it's in society or in the family. So we have to make sure those children are healthy and that they grow well and that they are accepted in their neighborhoods and in their in this world, this country of ours, and citizens, and its valuable citizens. And if there are no activities for these children, if there's no one out there to do that, we need to create something. And as you see, I'm very passionate about that. But it's really one of the critical issues that we're facing today. It's not allowing our children to fall in the wrong hands. And this book is all about family rejection and low self-esteem, which is one of the things that our teenagers suffer with most. So it's very important that we take a look at this topic and, take a look at it. And some of the side issues in this story is family rejection, and the self-esteem issue, the feeling of inadequacy, and also extended families and how families are defined. How do we define a family? Sometimes God gives us families, and sometimes we have to create our families, and sometimes we're accepted into families we don't even know, we're going to be a part of. But people with warm hearts, open hearts, they invite us in, and which is a wonderful thing, whether we are biologically connected or not. Now, this is a doozy here. Buttermilk Bottom. It's a great story. From an old neighborhood I lived in as a child, and I didn't live in there. Mistake. I passed this neighborhood, but I played on these streets, which were muddy and dirt roads that were caused by water that constantly filtered into this recessed neighborhood. It was absolutely recessed in the ground, say 50, 60 feet into the ground. So it was a hole. They call it the bottom because it actually was the bottom. And the people there received barely any services at all. Very few city services went to these people. It's also one of the first neighborhoods that blacks moved into after the Civil War and after slavery. So you can imagine the conditions. They were pretty much maybe a step up above the slave cabins. So take a look at this. It's really great stuff as far as looking at our history and what we had to live through during the Jim Crow era, and living under the apartheid system we had here in this country, which which allowed us to live in squalor in many instances. People who lived here, some of them were really great. Some became doctors, some became teachers, some became lawyers, some became very, very successful, but many did not. So, and this neighborhood lasted up until the 60s. So that says something, to be living in conditions like this. So Take a look at bottom. Everything is in it. Everything is in it. Like I do historical romance, and it's loaded with wonderful, wonderful stories about people in love, people inappropriately in love, because that's one of the things that I think we don't look at enough. Sometimes people fall in love and they have no business falling in love. And even though a person may say, I don't like you, I don't like you, I don't like you, there is no future for the two of us, sometimes people never ever hear that. We're not going to make it, we're not going to ever be married, or they just keep you going and going and going until you are senior citizens sometimes. There are wonderful stories in this book about wonderful, interesting characters. And one of my favorites is The Blues Singer. So you need to take a look at that. It's really a great book. And my latest one, guys, and I'll be done in a second. This is Enslaved. And this follows the life and imprisonment and capture and enslavement of an African princess and one of her royal guards in our system of slavery here in this country, one of the darkest eras for African Americans, and one of the things that we are still dealing with today. Some of the attitudes left over from this era where we were not valued as human beings. Those attitudes are being carried through to today. And it's really important that we stay involved in the Black Lives Matter movement and all the movements that will progress us to the point where we get justice in this country. We have to do what's needed. And our most powerful weapon, I'll repeat this a million times, vote. You must register to vote to make sure this does not ever happen again. Okay? And you can look back in history and see other tragedies that happened to other races. People, even with the Jews, they did not expect to be put in gas chambers because they thought they were well situated. They didn't know that the political atmosphere turned on them in seconds. And then they were the outsiders. They were stripped of everything they owned. So it's very important that we own our history and guard it and make sure that our generations that exist today and tomorrow will not fall under this trap. So America is changing for the best, but people are opposing the changes. So we have to make sure that we usher in kindness, justice, peace, and harmony. Those things that honor humanity. So we have to do that. America must do that. So I invite you to write. I invite you to read, and I invite you to stay involved in the process and be politically active. It's really, really important that you do. Now, I want you to take a moment and like my channel and then subscribe to it. I need your support, okay? You take care, love someone special, and love to you.